Det är helt okej för er att vi talar dansk, because? Okay, is there somebody here not fluent in Danish? Okay, a couple. You know, they actually all are fluent in Danish because all Finnish people know all languages in the world. They're just very, very shy.
Oh, I see.
Now, Mette, if we actually talk in this broken English that is our universal language, you're of course genetically programmed to make the rest of us look bad. Not only are you young and beautiful, you worked as a consultant at McKinsey, then you went on to co-found a super successful app. Now you're vice president, international vice president of Under Armour. Is this really a plan to make me look bad?
I'm sorry about that, and as soon as I start talking, you'll notice my broken Danish accent, so at least I don't have that going for me.
Well, because we all know that I'm always put here with the smart and beautiful people just so they look more smart and beautiful. And this time I was put here with somebody who has a fantastic success story to tell. So, Endomondo. Could you tell us a little bit about how Endomondo came to be and how you actually built this great disruption of yours?
Yes. So we were 3 McKinsey consultants, and this is not the beginning of a joke.
It would be a sad joke indeed.
There were 3 consultants, and we worked in Copenhagen, and we traveled around the world, and then we started talking about doing something else. We wanted to build our own company. We wanted to follow through from the initial phase and all the way and just run it all. Take all the decisions without any partners. And then, above all, I think we just wanted meaning. We wanted to really have an impact on people. Mm-hmm. So that's how it started. And we looked at different ideas. And we all had backgrounds in sports, so that was our main passion. And we looked at the trends going on at the time. We noticed how social communities were becoming popular, individual sports were becoming popular because people liked the flexibility of just go for a run or bike ride. And then we were just amazed at how little technology we have in sports. I mean, if you look 30, 50 years back, we pretty much hadn't gotten anything besides the GPS watch. And then when you looked at all other aspects of life, it was really making a big impact. So we thought, can we use technology to make fitness fun? That's kind of how it began.
But it wasn't always smooth sailing, was it?
No, and I should say I definitely also had some concerns about, when you're at McKinsey, it's a high prestige job, and you leave a lot of safety. So for me personally, I actually joined McKinsey because I have a master's in political science and I wanted to work in the private sector. And those two things didn't go well hand in hand. So for me, McKinsey became a stepping stone. And I was just waiting for that job offer from a client so I could actually get to the next stage. And then on the same day I had to give feedback on that job offer, I also had to let these two friends at McKinsey know whether I was on board or not. I was working in New York at the time, and walking home from the hotel to the office, or from the office to the hotel, this gypsy lady came up to me in the street. I was just waiting at a red light, and she didn't say a thing. She just gave me a postcard and took off. It's like, that's weird. And I was
if you have 3 consultants and a gypsy lady, you're in a Hollywood movie, right?
Yeah, it could be. I was like, that's really weird. And I was literally going to make that call when I got to the hotel. And so this is the postcard she gave me. Whatever our wildest dreams may be, they only scratch the surface of what's possible. And I'm a pretty rational person. Everyone who knows me will say I am, but that definitely felt like a sign. So declined the offer and joined the Endo guys.
Have you ever tried to find this gypsy lady again?
I have not.
I mean, I think you should go to New York and hunt her down. Clearly, she has more cards prepared for you.
I may owe her a little bit, yeah. So that's how it all started. And then the app came on board shortly thereafter. Remember, this was in 2007. There were no app stores. The phones didn't have GPS. People didn't want to run with a phone. Pretty much everything was kind of uphill. But we thought it was a great idea, and we launched the first version in 2008. And then 100 days after launch, this is what our user uptake looks like. And these are not millions of users, or 10,000s of users, or even hundreds of users. These are just users. So 100 days after launch, we literally had days with 0 new users. And at that time, on our website, you could see the latest 3 people to sign up. There would be a picture of them. And some days, when we left the office around midnight, it would be the same exact 3 faces as when we came in at 8 o'clock. So we definitely had some long days.
You must be the first McKinsey consultant I've met who trusts gypsy women more than data.
yeah, probably. So it was definitely uphill for a long time. And it actually took 2.5 years from we launched just to reach the first million. And we always talk about the hockey stick, but I don't think people always realize how long it feels when you're on that stick. It is a really long one.
I mean, if you look at that curve, I mean, you really had to have a lot of trust and belief in this product still. I mean, why did you trust this for so long?
Again, not very consultancy-like, but it just felt right. I mean, we had that passion, and throughout this journey, and it's been 8 years next month, I've always felt like, if you give me 3 more months, everything will have changed. I can see the flag, it's right there. And then what happens is, as soon as you grab it, you realize the next mountain is even bigger, and there's another flag, and now we got to go again. So I've kind of felt that way all throughout this period.
We know that successful people, I mean, one thing that kind of defines successful people is perseverance, the capacity to continue despite all the data and despite this kind of very, very long time of fighting. But I mean, this looks still like success. It looks like very slow success, but still success. Weren't there any kind of true failures or moments of failure along the path?
Definitely. And I think every startup has its downturns, and sometimes they become real spirals that are really negative and hard to break out of. And it's not just true for startups. I think it's true for companies, mature companies as well. But we definitely had our fair share. So just here's another hockey stick. This is the perception when you talk about a successful startup. We talk about Facebook and other companies, and it's always something like 3 guys in a basement with a laptop, and then bam, 10 seconds later they had 100 million users and were a big business. Yeah. And that's just not the reality. So when I talk to entrepreneurs, I always make a point out of explaining that the reality is that even though that's the picture you want to create, and whenever a reporter calls you, that's definitely the only picture you're going to support. But the reality is that you'll have a lot of crises on like backstage, and it's really, I think, being an entrepreneur, it's not about the choice to become one. I think that's the least of it. The main accomplishment is just to stick in there when the going gets really tough.
But when you look at this, I mean, in the crowd, both here and there, I mean, you do have some entrepreneurs, clearly, but also a lot of people from fairly staid, normal corporations. And I mean, dips in morale, I think they are fairly universal. There's a fair few Finnish companies that has had dips in morale.
Yeah.
What would be your lesson to them?
So the hard thing is just to snap out of it. And
you sound like our prime minister now.
And I think it's also, when you start your own company, it's also a very personal journey. You have to evolve as a person throughout these phases, just like your company has to. So I think it's been a really good learning experience, and you also have to help the team get them through all these phases, because they have to keep up as well. And if you don't have a good team, and if you don't have the people with you, then everything else is more or less doesn't matter. So really keeping up that morale, even when you have 4 months of cash left and no business model in sight, that's a good challenge.
I think this kind of links also to what Cunningham earlier said about the role of the leader as somebody who boosts, who elevates people, and so on. But what's also interesting about your story is, of course, I mean, Endomondo is a digital product, and when we talk under the heading of disruption, digitalization is always the kind of term being used. But at the same time, a lot of us kind of go around wondering, what is digitalization? I mean, you're trying to put it into shoes and clothes and everything. What to you really is digitalization, and how important will it still be? I mean, is there still much to be discovered?
yeah, I think we're only just getting started with all of this. And the first, within my space and in the Endomondo sphere, the first 6, 7, 8 years have been around gathering a lot of data and finding frictionless ways to gather that data. And now, next phase is going to be, so what? What do we do with all this data? How can we really provide an impact that motivates people to exercise more and lead healthier lives? And we don't want to do this in a boring way. And I think Simon Sinek did a great job explaining endorphins and why those are nice. So this is really all about the endorphins and helping people exercise.
So what are the next things you're looking at now? What's the exciting,
Yeah.
what can I buy tomorrow?
Well, I don't know what you can buy. Yeah, you can buy Endomondo Premium tomorrow.
Okay.
But you can get that today
This
as
plug
well.
sponsored by. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, so longer term, I'm excited about, after joining Under Armour, which is a performance sports apparel brand that is really on fire in the US, there's a lot we can do together, because Under Armour was founded on innovation. Kevin Plank basically invented the first performance t-shirt. And we were founded on innovation as well. So when you start combining that, what we think of as wearables today, 3, 4, 5 years from now, we'll call apparel. And I think that's exciting.
Absolutely. Now, how do you share your time between Endomondo and Under Armour these days? Does it challenge you to kind of still have roles in both?
Well, I have roles in both, but they're also combined, so it's all synergies. So I don't think of it as two separate roles, but I definitely have a lot of new tasks and a lot of involvement with the US that I didn't have before. I didn't have to travel a lot earlier. Now I've been to the US 10 or 12 times this year, so that's changed a little bit.
I mean, I guess what a lot of us are kind of thinking about when we look at very, very successful people is, how do they make the time? I mean, I find it difficult enough to get out of bed every morning. And you seem to be jetting off to the US and founding companies and working at an international level at the same time. What's your best tips on time management for this crowd?
Well, first of all, I don't think anyone has it all. You give up some things. That's a compromise and a choice you make. The best very specific advice I have is to take time out to be with if you have kids, be with your family when they get out of daycare or kindergarten or school or whatever. And then I personally have a late shift. It starts the second my daughter's asleep, then I start my late shift. And it works out perfectly, because
A lot of us have to sleep as well, though.
yeah, well, but
I love the fact that you go, well, yeah, you need to. I mean, just not everyone's bionic. Yeah.
Well, luckily she goes to bed at 7:30, so I wouldn't normally go to bed at 7:30 anyway.
boss.
So you have quite a few hours. It's almost half a work day. You can actually, and you have no one interrupting you, and that's just a blessing.
Clearly you haven't met my partner. I'm not sure why that should get an applause, but anyway. Now, if we go back to disruption, I mean, that's the theme here, and it is, of course, the kind of thing that we look to people like you who are disrupting, are changing. But at the same time, the word has become a little bit of an empty bullshit phrase. I mean, it is deployed by consultants for pretty much everything. What does disruption mean for you? What's the kind of true meaning of the word?
The true meaning. I think of it as a type of innovation that really changes an industry. I think that would be my short definition.
And what industry is it that you feel that you've been changing with, for instance, Endomondo? Is it fitness? Is it wearables?
No, it's health and fitness, and and part of what's happening is that all of this is kind of merging into one big part. But it is definitely within the broader health and fitness space.
And when you look at, so you're trying to change this industry. What would be the end point? What do you want the health and fitness industry to become? How are you trying to kind of insert extra meaning into it?
So we want to empower everybody to basically be more active and understand their health, and then help them to make the right decisions. And we don't want to tell people you should do this or you should do that, but really get the fun aspect into it and get the social element in. That's what we're aiming for.
Okay. But I mean, when you present it like that, it sounds so easy. What did you do today? Well, I revolutionized an industry. What did you do? So, can we learn to become, I think a lot of people here are kind of thinking about, some of these people have boring jobs. Trust me.
Yeah,
some of them are really boring jobs.
Sure.
There are a couple of lawyers here, I've seen them.
They look all...
Let's not be mean to the lawyers. They have it hard enough.
My sister's a lawyer, I know.
No, but can you learn to be a disruptor? How do you learn this? How do you wake up in the morning and say, do you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to revolutionize an industry.
Yeah, I don't think anyone really wakes up that way, but yeah, I think we just saw some trends and we saw a need. The need we saw was that 80% of all people will say that they would like to be more active than they are today. And that was the problem we set out to solve. Because clearly people don't really like the information that it's good for you. And we also know once we're done with the run, it feels, I agree it's going to fade away, but it feels pretty great. So it's just that we lack the motivation. And that's the problem we set out to solve. We didn't kind of want to be disruptive just for the sake of it. It's all very grounded in a product and a need, and how do we solve that?
I would challenge you that it always feels great after a run. I hate every moment, but...
Not after, do you?
I also after. I love the fact that it's over. That's basically it.
Yeah, so it feels good.
And I won't be nagged on for at least 24 hours. But you said trends, you spot trends, and then that's one of the things we of course talk about a lot, that you have to kind of pick up the weak signals, and there's almost this mysticism. Now, of course, you had a gypsy woman help you, so that's good.
Yeah, thanks.
But the rest of us who do not have random gypsy women giving us hints and cards, what are your tips on trend spotting? Anyone can kind of see, there's a lot of phone usage. But how did you go about really spotting the trends?
But I think the secret ingredient is that you need to have a passion for it, because otherwise you become a consultant, and you can do that, and you can go out and you can say, these are the things we see, and here's what. But
that's my favorite quote so far. Yes.
So.
Yes.
You need to want to change something and have an impact. And as cheesy as it may sound, we wanted to make the world better. We wanted to, make people happier.
But how, for people who kind of are still kind of tottering between two options, how do you find that courage to follow that passion? Or to begin with, how do you find your passion? I'm not always sure I know my passion.
Yeah, then you maybe don't have a lot of passions. But you...
They're just setting me up for this. I'm getting abused and abused. I'm on the board. I'm not supposed to be above this kind of stuff.
But I think what often happens is that people are so busy living their lives that they forget, to stop up and think. And is this really what am I really happy with this? Is this what I want to do? Is there maybe another option? And then I think it's always healthy to just ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? If you're 25 years old and at McKinsey and you quit your job, the worst thing that can possibly happen is that you lose whatever little startup capital we put up front and maybe 6 months of salary. Financially, at least, that's the risk. I think the trickier risk is the personal risk. You lose a lot of pride if it goes wrong. And I think that's an issue we have in Scandinavia. They don't have it to the same extent in the US. In the US, whenever someone becomes an entrepreneur, everyone is like, congratulations, that's exciting. We don't understand what you're doing, but congrats on that decision. Here, when we quit McKinsey, people were like, are you out of your mind? Yeah. Why would anyone, what are you talking about? There are no GPS phones. There are no, how do you even distribute an app? I don't get it. So I think there's a mindset thing where we still have a gap to the US and Scandinavia, that just taking the chance is actually something that should be encouraged.
Actually, I think there is something very important here, something that the audience might not really get. We often talk in Finland about the rest of the Nordics, as if it was all one big group. But Danes and Finns are actually fairly similar. Not just because we both hate the Swedes, which we do, but there is also a similar kind of, there is the Jante law, there is a sense of you shouldn't really kind of push too hard. But do you feel in Denmark that climate is changing? Is there a better climate now for trying new stuff, going into entrepreneurship and so on?
Yeah, I think the whole startup community in Denmark, and especially in Copenhagen, is definitely thriving, and we have a lot of interesting companies that look very promising. And it is changing a little bit, but I wish we would be more positive around entrepreneurship in general, instead of just, really applauding the ones who make it, because there are a lot of people who don't make it, and they still deserve credit for trying. Without trying, you don't get anywhere, for sure.
Now I'm going to ask something which might seem a little strange, because it's not the way we normally ask these questions, but almost always on stages like these, when we start talking about entrepreneurship, sooner or later we come to the point, aren't politicians shit? They're basically how politicians not making the right decisions and so on.
Yeah.
But could you tell me some things you feel politicians in Denmark have done right to help entrepreneurship? Something that actually contributed to the better climate?
No.
I tried.
Yeah.
I tried.
No, I think there are a lot of, someone told me that I think he had counted like 82 government initiatives to help the startup environment. And, we never touched base with any one of those 82, and most other successful companies I know didn't either. So I think we're wasting a lot of money on some initiatives that have kind of a wacky impact. And what I would just love for us to do was inspire our kids. To explain to the next generation that being an entrepreneur it's like a real job. It's actually an option. I went through political science at university without even considering that as a viable career path. And I think that's something we need to fix. And it starts earlier, even in elementary school.
Yeah, but how early? How old is your daughter?
4 next month.
That's a little early to teach entrepreneurship.
Yeah, but
I mean, it has to start at some point.
Not really.
Okay, please share this.
No, but
I love this
mean,
stuff.
you can encourage your kid from whatever age, right? I mean, you can tell your kid that this is how we do things, and this is how we've always done, and here's how you go out with your plate after dinner. Or you can just let her figure it out, and she's gonna drop the damn fork 4, 5, or 10 times. But just let them grow with that, make their own.
Last year on this very same stage, we had Linda Liukas, who's creating children's books on coding. And I've always kind of loved the fact that we always talk about teaching entrepreneurship to university students. They're already destroyed.
Yeah, you have to go in earlier.
Yeah, because at universities are engines to create civil servants. Yeah. That's what they're for. We teach kids to sit down, take notes. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. Looking at trends, I also think in our kids' generation, a lot of them are going to be self-employed. I mean, we see that more and more people, quit their job, become freelancers, consultants, whatever it is. So I think, we should start now, because that's really what a lot of them are going to do anyway.
So if you were a politician, heaven forbid, but if you were a politician and had some power in Denmark to actually institute laws that would benefit entrepreneurship, would benefit innovators, where would you start?
So what we really need is basically money.
Me too.
It's hard to raise capital. I think it's getting easier. I'm not convinced that it's the government's job, but I think they may be able to regulate in a way where private people are going to invest more. So look at the taxes and look at what you can deduct if it goes wrong, and all those things. I think something worth looking at. And also, as a new startup, you can't pay your first employees what they used to make. So some of our first employees, they took like 60-70% salary cuts just to join, because they were driven by passion and they wanted to be part of it. And then we gave them some equity instead, but the taxation of this equity is really ridiculous in Denmark, at least. So just looking at some of those setups, I think would go a long way.
Yeah. This will, by the way, shock Finnish people. The taxation in Denmark is as insane as it is here. I know we don't believe it, but there is one more country that has fucked this up as much as we have.
And I bet you we have more expensive cars too.
Yeah, and which Mette pointed out, their cars are actually more expensive than ours. Suck on that. Yeah. But okay, but what do you, I mean, this is, we are at the Nordic Business Forum, we are in Helsinki, so there is a question I am legally obliged to ask you, and that is, what about Finland? Because we have to have this question. Finns can't have a conversation like this without asking, what do you think about Finland? And please be honest, even though it might hurt.
What do I think about Finland? I actually have to admit it's the first time I'm in Helsinki. And I wish I had more time. I'm definitely coming back. I saw some architecture on the way here. It looked really good. Other than that, we have a Finnish guy on our team.
Every good company does.
Yeah. We have a team of 53 people, and across those 53, we have 18 nationalities. One of them is a Finnish guy, so he's a great guy for sure.
But I think that this is interesting because often when we talk about big companies, we always come back to nations. We come back to, is it Finland, Sweden, Denmark, the US? But more and more entrepreneurs I talk to kind of don't really think in nations any longer.
No.
Where do you think, where is Endomondo placed? I mean, if you think kind of outside the kind of nation state framework.
Well, I don't think of myself as a Dane as such. I think more of myself as a European, I think. I'm mocking my new American colleagues because they tend to think Europe is one country. So being responsible for international, and if you're at a US company, you know, international is everything outside the US. That's how the world works. But I'm mocking them all the time with, you know, understanding that we have a lot of different cultures. But despite that, I don't really think of myself as a Dane or, you know, versus a Norwegian or Swede. Even though we like to mug each other, I think we are fairly.
And maybe this is a lesson that we need to kind of break free from the notion that we are so bound by our kind of cultural heritage or by our national heritage, and kind of start thinking more globally, more internationally.
Yeah. And at least just as a region, I think there's some safety in numbers. So, you know, there aren't a lot of us in any one of these countries, but together we start having some mass.
And we can start attacking the Americans. Now, you are on the top 20 businesswomen in Europe. You're the youngest. And I'm sure you don't kind of want to really kind of go into how does it feel to be a young woman in business, because that is the most patronizing question ever. But I mean, we have a fair amount of people here who are slightly older than you, including me. So what, from your perspective, what is the best advice you can give to the sad middle-aged gits like me in the audience? What should we learn from you?
Well, when I decide what to spend my professional life on, and that's really most of my awakened time, I have some criteria that I don't compromise with. And one is that it needs to make sense. There needs to be meaning to it. And the second one is that I want to work with great people. Life is just too short for, if you don't want to have a beer with your business partner, then find another business partner. You need to actually like the people you work with. And the third one is, and the third one is just that I like to develop, I like to evolve. And this whole, these past 8 years have been a great journey, also personally and professionally, but that's really something I want to keep doing. And I definitely have a lot of new challenges with Under Armour now.
I guess that what we can learn is basically that the path, as you showed so clearly, the path might be bumpy, but you can still do it even if you're as old and sad as me. Now, but there are actually some people in the audience that are younger than you, believe it or not.
I'm sure I'm really not that young.
I'm going to hammer this home, trust me. Now, what's your advice to the young? What's your advice to the young in Denmark? What would be your advice to the young in Finland?
I think one main advantage of being young is that you don't yet know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So you're still a little naive, and if you're thinking about starting up a company, that's great. I mean, you have to be pretty naive. So the sooner you do it, almost, the better. And the other thing is, when you're young and you don't make a lot of money yet, you don't have a lot of expenses to cover. You don't have an expensive mortgage or a big car or anything like that. So you can really live off of a really low or no salary for a longer period of time. So take full advantage of that.
That sounds like a perfect kind of rest, yeah. That sounds like a perfect recipe for success in a sense, which can summarize this perfectly. So the 3 things we should take away from this session would be 1, perseverance, continuing even though there might be bumps in the road. 2nd, seeing naivete as a resource. And 3rd, always, always, always trust random gypsy women. Ladies and gentlemen, Mette Lykke.
Thanks.